Our brush embroidery is done. It's dried, which you're going to want this to dry at least 4 hours, if not overnight. And I didn't show you before, but I had made a template of my clock. And since I am not a gigantic Roman numeral expert, I went ahead and wrote those Roman numerals in and the way that they would be facing if you looked at the clock. And I've got this wrong. So, alright, there we go. So we have 12, 3, 6, and 9. What I'm going to do is put a pin, center this so that I like it, put a pin above where the mark is. Try and keep it as evenly spaced as possible. And my pins are going to mark that 12, 3, 6, and 9. Rather than put all the numbers on, I thought it would be too crowded. And I'm just going to kind of turn these, make sure I can see my hole. And don't worry, those holes are going to be covered up. So we're going to take the pins out. I'm going to look and make sure that I have some holes. And this hole's a little bit. Okay. So I can put this to the side for my next clock. Put my pins away for later. And we're going to start with, before we begin, I have a cup of cool boiled water in case I make a mistake. I have 2 toothpicks, one for black and one for this color that I'm going to be beating around in here will not be the ivory because I'm going to be painting it gold. So I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I knew that I remembered to paint it gold. So that's for the deeper ivory or the more gold color in case I need to lift anything up. I will tell you the other thing I have is some Everclear, which is a pretty high proof, I think it's 110 proof alcohol. The reason I have that is because black will stain my nice white face. If you need to lift up your color, your black color, you're going to want to pick it up with your toothpick that you've dedicated for black, and then put your Everclear in some sort of a container, take your little brush and clean it up. Hopefully you won't be able to see it, or you'll be able to go over it, but black does stain, so that's the best way that I know how to get it up without ruining everything. So the other thing I want to do is I'm going to constantly be making sure, because this is a number 1 tip and it's got such a small hole that it gets clogged easily, so I want to make sure that it's constantly clean. And I'm working with a soft peak consistency so that I can write a line without the line breaking, and I will show you that right here. So I'm going to start, I'm going to lift up, and I broke, so I'm going to show you again. I'm going to start, I'm going to lift up, come unattached to my little board, lift up, and then release to go down. And make sure that I clean my tip. I'm going to get rid of this so that I don't end up getting black on my hand, and obviously this is going to be my dedicated. And then of course I have my paper towel. So I am not, like I said, the best person at the Roman numerals, so I'm actually going to bring back in my little template to see. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go where these little dots are and put a dot so I know this is where my numbers are going to go. And because clocks have little dots. So I'm going to go right over my cookie. I'm going to make a thin X. And those 2 little 1 lines. because the clocks were made then so that you could see the numbers by looking at it the way it was facing you, I'm going to turn my cookie, which I would do anyway, but I don't have to write backwards. So I'm going to do a 3. So there's my 3 lines for 3. And then my 6 will be a V and a 1. And then my 9 will be a 1 and an X. So I've got my numbers on, and I've got black hands. So I'm just going to make sure to wipe them down so I don't destroy my cookie with my black hands on my board. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little dot in the center so that I can put the hands of time in. I'm going to make sure that my tip is piping and everything is good. And everything right now is of soft peak consistency. So I have my little line, my dot I mean, and I'm just going to take a wet brush and take down that peak. And then I'm going to take my black and I'm going to go around it in a circle. I looked at a bunch of clocks that were done in 1920, and I noticed they all had this little center thing in common. Now I get to decide what time it is, and at this point I can decide if I'm going to put in my 1 and my 2. I'm not going to draw them in, but I'm going to put little dots so that we know what time it is. So I have to decide, what do I want to do? Well, I don't really want it to face up. I think that might be harsh. So I'm going to take a line and come towards the dot that represents number 1. And my line broke. And I did say that you don't want to I'm not going to pick up the hoe line. I'm going to try and come in here and just attach it so that way I don't have to worry about the black staining my face. It broke again. So I'm going to lift it up all the way. And I'm going to try and follow my mark. Since I've already stained my face, there's no reason to take some alcohol to it. I'm going to make sure this tip is doing okay. It isn't clogged, and it's fine. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to attach it to where that circle is. And I'm going to go over where I stained my face of the clock. Obviously not my own face, thank goodness. Alright, so I have it on 1. What time do I want it to be? 5 after 4, 5 after 6. I think 5 after 5 might look pretty good. I'm going to come down to the time. And if you find that your line keeps breaking and you know your consistency is okay, slow down. I think I might have been going a little bit too fast. And before that even hits the face, I'm going to pick it up. Or not. Alright. we'll just go in and tidy it up. And I'm actually going to put the arrow there, so we're okay. So the type of arrow that I want to do, I just kind of want to make a little C curl and come up, and another C curl on the other side and come up. Something that looks old-fashioned. Same thing over here. C curl that comes up, and another C curl that comes up. Okay, so I'm going to wipe my hands again because they have black on them. And pretty much you can't see where I stained. We're good. I do see that my line though is not completely straight. So I'm just going to go in with a damp brush and move it over and tame this down a little bit. Okay. Now for the area between my clock face and the clock, I'm going to do, I tried all sorts of different things, and what I liked best was a little seashell. So I'm using a number 43 rope tip that is PME, and I'm going to pull with pressure and release, and pull with pressure and release, and just make little dots, or little seashells, excuse me, all the way around. I thought it was a nice old-fashioned look. It would be pretty painted in gold. And what I'm doing is coming back as far as I think the bead needs to be. And I can see that my tails, where they're hitting that brush embroidery, are not coming down, so I'm going to bring them down a little bit. Okay. And this is where you want your pressure to be exactly the same in your bag, so that your beads will come out the same size. You want to go up, release, and swipe down. Up, release, and swipe down. Up, release, and swipe down. And I am going over a little bit of that brush embroidery in order to get a perfectly round circle. And that's alright. The design just is going to go underneath. Sydney and I and my husband actually watched The Great Gatsby last night. She was in her apartment in DC and we were in our home, but we watched it together to make sure that I had the right costume for, or that right 1920 look for that era. The Roaring Twenties is one of the times in history that I absolutely adore. There's quite a few of them, and they make no sense. Like I said, I could go back to 1920, you could drop me there in a time machine, and I'd be perfectly happy. I'd also be happy during the turn of the century. And then again, I would be happy during the 60s. So I make absolutely no logical sense as far as the times that I like. And I wonder if in 100 years someone will be saying that they would want to go back to 2013. I'm just going to even this up a little bit with a damp brush. And now we have the face of our clock. I'm going to let this dry, and then I will go over it with gold dust and a little bit of the Everclear alcohol and give it a gold look. I'm also going to decorate parts of the cookie. But here's your clock. And it's 5 after 5.